I'm very busy today because I have to clean my entire house and make it look presentable. But all I've been doing is gardening because the garden has attracted my attention and my criticism, and it's been neglected, and so I'm trying to do some basic jobs to tidy it up. And because it's the autumn and the garden has a big sycamore tree in the corner, not mine, it's covered with leaves very regularly, and there are still plenty of leaves on the tree, and they take ages to collect and to gather, and they get into every nook and cranny, and it comes to having to pick them up one by one in many places. It's quite a chore, but the tree is beautiful in the summer, so and the leaves ultimately will provide very good sort of compost or tilth. The soil is very fertile here. Um, but the garden is troubled in because of drainage, and this is something that if I were to stay here, I would address it as best as I can. It's quite a problem, but I found ways I've sort of invented or well copied ways of mitigating at the very least. And I try to keep my house clean and tidy, but I live alone and I'm working also. And so I just don't really have enough time between morning and night to do everything that needs to be done, and to sit around a bit as well as I do, I suppose. It seems perfectly reasonable to take a rest. And I have no helper. This is the problem, you know. I was thinking about the wedding ring matter. I told the jeweler that my wife didn't want a wedding ring, but in actual fact, I was forgetting that I had actually bought her one, of course, and it wasn't a cheap ring. I don't suppose it was anything tremendous, but I would tend to be a bit lavish in my own estimation. My wife was never really happy with my lavishness. Um, when it concerned her, but if it concerned somebody else, she generally criticized it, especially if it concerned me. She wouldn't agree to me buying things, and I uh, just endured and resented. Imagine how weak was I in my youth, and how deceived also by the nature of the relationship that I had with this woman. And I'm not suggesting that this is a singular case. I think it's a general case that we find it hard to look at it and hard to contemplate because of this spell that has been cast upon us, where we've been uh, persuaded to follow women. This is the shepherd following the flock. That's not really going to go very well, is it, when you think about it? Because sheep tend to wander in all sorts of different directions. Um, I don't know whether they would continue to move as a flock without a shepherd and without perhaps a couple of dogs to sort things out. I mean, otherwise, why would you have those things? So it's a spell that's been cast over us all, and we find it hard to imagine. But it would be perfectly reasonable for a woman to come and help me in my house in exchange for provision and shelter. Why not, if she has a mind to? And that would re-establish a reasonable relationship, because women, ultimately, they're bored. What are they doing? You can get pets and you can go to conferences and have meetings with your friends, increasingly female, perhaps by preference female. Are we to have a war then between the genders? Is this the idea? With this concept of the patriarchy. People who fight against the patriarchy really, there is that thing, love thy neighbor as thyself, and of course that is always uppermost in my mind. But if you're fighting against the patriarchy, and so you're fighting against me, ultimately, and my brothers, and it's so unjust when I think back of how much has been done for you women, how we have cared for you and paid for your every whim and been kind to you, and you have repaid us by calling us abusers and holding unjust authority and challenging us at every single turn. Because ultimately, it's a hatred of God. You have to understand that philosophically, that's how it works. Because these people believe that by their volition and by their legislation and by their coercion, they can change the nature of men into something that they find more acceptable, more pleasing, more in line, more controllable, I would suggest. The conceit of that idea is absolutely breathtaking. This is a piece of flotsam being thrust along a raging river and thinking in its mind that it will go, surely swim, and change the very course of that spring. It's unthinkable. Whatever you think God is, there's no way that you can have any influence. The conceit is just breathtaking. And of course, the endeavor will fail at every turn and produce only misery and ill feeling and unrighteous accusations, and our natural friendliness is suddenly taken from us. As men and women can be very friendly together, you see. That's why it's good that we should be together. Because we're not competing, and we can have a very nice relationship. But we have to, treat one another carefully, of course, and try to provide some value. And, I suppose that's both the men and the women, but mainly I would say the women, because that's where value has just been withdrawn. To ask a woman to iron a shirt is almost a capital offence, I think, or certainly serious. I mean, you probably wouldn't do any jail time, but so far, but I mean, who can say now that apparently even what we can say can be interpreted in certain ways. It's the madness is just breathtaking, but it will never have any effect, because you can't change the nature of people. Only God can do it. You can't use any form of coercion of your own, whatever it may be. But those people that are calling the patriarch are claiming that the patriarchy is an evil and destructive force in society. I can't really, I just can't support them at all. And of course I can't, because you're standing directly against me. um, it's not very nice to do that. I'm sorry. You know, you might want to rethink that position. Surely, why would you want to stand directly against somebody who has effectively only supported you, bought you rings, paid for your university, perhaps, endeavoured to get you into a good position, looked after you as his wife, and made sure that you lacked nothing, been indulgent, tolerated even the very deepest treachery, and forgiven, and always trying to be nice and careful, and never forgiven for a single error. That's the truth of the matter. That's how it is. That's why I live alone, and I'm not, and many men of my age, most men of my age almost perhaps, live alone, either through the death of a wife perhaps, or a divorce, or just not having married. It's very, very common. But I think all of those men would benefit from having a lady to come and just kind of do the cleaning and take care of all sorts of things around the house from time to time. If it were an honest exchange, why not? Obviously, you would have to provide some sustenance, and that would be reasonable. It's a job she's doing. That's what we want. We want women in that. The closest thing that I had to having the kind of wife that I would like is when the witch was coming and doing the cleaning. That was only 2 hours a week, but I was very satisfied, and I wanted her, of course, to stay for far longer than 2 hours. But I couldn't pay that hourly rate, it would have to be agreed. And so really that would be a paid position, and a wife, you could say, is a paid position. She should expect to have her sustenance if she's using all of her time to look after her husband and the children and their children. Of course it's a paid position. It should be a very highly paid position indeed. But the woman of that nature has abandoned her vanity to some extent, you see. So she has no need of riches and opulence. Her beauty is in her spirit and in her nature, in her kindness. I suspect she would also be very beautiful. And all this has been cast aside and cast into the mire for the sake of some ridiculous conceit that a simple matter of examining the philosophical premises will reveal as being absolutely fallacious and I don't know quite how to express it. Just so poorly thought out and tautological in every aspect. I mean, come on. Because we have to insist that men and women are identical, which is patently untrue. Whether we're talking about physicality or nature drives. Stones and a womb are very different. God bless.